Welcome back. We will continue on with our discussion of the amoebas. I failed to include the following two slides in the previous recording. So, to remind you, we were talking about Entamoeba hartmanni, which is also known as small race Entamoeba histolytica. It looks exactly like Entamoeba histolytica, it's just smaller. So it has a bullseye nucleus with the central karyosome and evenly distributed peripheral chromatin. So I have a couple of pictures to show you that. Although, just looking at these pictures and not knowing relatively size, we wouldn't be able to differentiate them. So again, these look exactly like Entamoeba histolytica trophs, which also look exactly like Entamoeba dispar. And here's a picture of a cyst with 3 and maybe even 4. I can see another little cyst maybe in another dimension back there peeking out. 4 nuclei, same nuclear characteristics, and we can also see the rounded chromatoidal bars. So definitely learn Entamoeba histolytica, Entamoeba dispar, and Entamoeba hartmanni at the same time. Put all those characteristics into the same cubbyhole or category to help you memorize all these things. But Entamoeba hartmanni is non-pathogenic. The motility is non-directional. It will have different surface antigens, so you could distinguish them immunologically. And of course, there's no erythrophagocytosis with these trophs. Okay, the next next parasite, non-pathogen, Entamoeba coli. Make sure you say and write out Entamoeba coli because you do not want to confuse this with the bacterium, which we refer to a lot as E. coli. So two different species, two different organisms completely. So never write E period coli in parasitology. Always write out Entamoeba coli. This is another non-pathogen commonly found in intestinal commensal, but again, we need to learn what the non-pathogens look like so that we know what the pathogenic ones look like. And it also suggests that the patient has had contaminated food or water, that they've ingested that. So it makes the tech on alert for the pathogenic ones and also the doctor. So the nuclear characteristics. The nucleus contains a large eccentrically located karyosome. So by eccentric, we mean not in the center, it's kicked off to the side a little bit. And it has uneven peripheral chromatin. So these are opposites of the previous parasites we've talked about. Entamoeba coli is larger than Entamoeba histolytica. The troph has sluggish, non-directional motility. The cytoplasm may contain bacteria and vacuoles. So here's your black and white. So there's uneven peripheral chromatin here, meaning it's going to be bumpy or more concentrated on one side. This is a beautiful picture of that. You see where the peripheral chromatin is thicker on this side and the karyosome is off center. It's not smack dab in the center like the other ones. So here's another one, a troph. The cyst is also larger than the cyst of Entamoeba histolytica, but what's more helpful is that this cyst can contain up to 8 nuclei. So if you see an organism with 5 or more nuclei, you're going to call it Entamoeba coli right away because all the other ones we've talked about so far and the next couple ones we're going to talk about, those cysts contain only up to 4 nuclei max. So when there's 5, 6, 7, 8, you know right away it's Entamoeba coli. These cysts can also contain pointed or splintered chromatoidal bars. So the ones we've talked about previously had nice rounded cigar-shaped chromatoidal bars. The opposite of that is for Entamoeba coli, they look very splintery or jagged edges. So the nuclear characteristics for the cyst are the same as the troph, where we have the nucleus that's not in the center, and uneven peripheral chromatin. And here it's showing you the splintery, the jagged-edged chromatoidal bars. So you need to learn the black and whites because in real life things can look distorted, so it's not going to be as picture perfect. But I can make out more than 4 nuclei in this picture. Again, I know they're not clear, but I know there's more than 4. And here's our very rough looking chromatoidal bars. Here I can see 5 nuclei very easily. So that is a huge giveaway that it's Entamoeba coli. Every cyst doesn't have to have chromatoidal bars. So just because it doesn't have it doesn't mean I'm thinking something else. The next one is Endolimax nana, another non-pathogen. This nucleus has a large, irregularly shaped, blot-like karyosome. And there is no peripheral chromatin. The absence of peripheral chromatin is a key feature here to think that it's Endolimax nana. Because there's no peripheral chromatin, it often just looks like there's a halo around the nucleus. There's just a clearing, or it might look like a buttonhole. The trophozoite is on the smaller side, and in fact you might confuse it with Entamoeba hartmanni. It has non-directional motility. The cytoplasm may contain vacuoles and bacteria. So here's what they mean by a large blot-like karyosome. It just looks like a blob. It's not nicely contained. Although this one does look nicely circular, they often look sort of bumpy. Now, there's going to be a border for the nucleus, but there's not that peripheral chromatin on the edge like we saw in the previous parasites. So using fine adjustment, it sort of just looks like a clearing or a halo around the nucleus. So here's some other pictures. I know you can't tell size, but it's fairly small. One nucleus. You should be able to tell that this karyosome is a lot bigger and more blot-like than the previous karyosomes we've seen. The cyst is also small, and it can contain up to 4 nuclei. Same nuclear characteristics, same blot-like karyosome, no peripheral chromatin. So here, I can see 3 nuclei at least, and I don't see any, I just see sort of clearings around them. And I know this picture isn't great, but there's no peripheral chromatin. This is a really good picture of Endolimax nana cyst. I can see 3 nuclei, and I can see that halo around each nucleus. I can see 4 nuclei in this one, but I can't really make out the clearing around them. So again, parasites aren't always have the same characteristics. So we learn textbook what they should look like, but in real life things can be very hard to distinguish. The next one is Iotamoeba buschlei, also non-pathogenic, and the nucleus, the nuclear characteristics are similar to Endolimax nana, where we have a large karyosome. It is sort of blot-like, but it also contains refractal achromatic granules. However, those are often not distinct in the permanent stain, so you may not get to see those granules. And just like Endolimax nana, there's no peripheral chromatin. So the troph has, this is sort of this, we've seen these bullets, these same bullets for previous parasites. On the smaller side, non-directional motility. And remember, the troph is the feeding stage, so this is where you're going to see like ingested bacteria or yeast or something. but no ingested RBCs. That's only for histolytica. So here are the trophs. I cannot make out those achromatic granules, but it's just like Indolamax nana, it is just sort of a blobby karyosome with no peripheral chromatin. Very large karyosome. The most characteristic form for Iodoamoeba bushleyi is the cyst. So what's very diagnostic here, what's very helpful, is that the cyst of Iodoamoeba bushleyi only has one nucleus, and it contains a large glycogen vacuole which will stain dark brown with iodine on the wet mounts. And in the permanently stained smears with trichrome, that vacuole appears empty. It just isn't clearing in the permanently stained smear. So far, all of the cysts we've talked about contain multiple nuclei. Iodoamoeba bushleyi is unique because its cyst contains only, it will never have more than one nucleus in the cyst. It's only got one nucleus, plus the presence of that large glycogen vacuole makes it very characteristic. And my memory clue is Iodoamoeba starts like iodine does. So remember, Iodoamoeba, iodine stain, it's going to stain that glycogen vacuole to help with identification. And also, the I looks like a Roman numeral 1. So I remember that there's only one nucleus for the cyst. One nucleus in the troph, one nucleus in the cyst. So here's our very diagnostic cyst that we could see. Distinctive cyst. So we see this glycogen vacuole. This is a permanently stained smear with trichrome. So it's not iodine. It's not a dark brown stain, but I note the clearing and then the one large nucleus. So here again, in a trichrome stained smear, one large nucleus, glycogen vacuole. This is what it would look like with iodine, and this is the glycogen vacuole staining dark brown with iodine. That is very characteristic. You would know right away this is Iodoamoeba. The last one we'll cover for this recording is Blastocystis hominis. Now, as far as categorizing this scientifically, the jury is still out. It started out being categorized as an algae, and in fact they still think it's related to algae. Then they thought, well, maybe it's a non-pathogenic yeast. And then a lot of people in the scientific community decided it's an amoeba. So for our purposes, we're putting it in the amoeba category. So we're calling it an intestinal protozoan amoeba. It is transmitted by the fecal-oral route. There's also controversy as to whether or not it's a pathogen. So it has been isolated in the stool of patients that are symptomatic that have no other cause for them to be symptomatic, meaning they didn't recover, they don't have a virus, they don't have another bacteria, they don't have another parasite. So the differential diagnosis is they just land on the fact that, well, they have Blastocystis hominis, so that must be what's causing their discomfort. And then other researchers say, no, it's not pathogenic. And then some people say it's an opportunistic pathogen where you have to be already immunosuppressed to be diseased with this. So may or may not be pathogenic. What's also confusing is that this guy has several different forms for its life cycle. There is an amoeboid form, a granular form, a vacuolar form, and a cyst form. So it exists as four different life cycle stages. The only one we're going to learn is the vacuolar form, and that's the one we would see in the lab. What is helpful is that the vacuolar form is very obvious. It's it's on the smaller side and it's usually spherical. It has a large central body, which is a fluid-filled vacuole, so large that it's taking up 90% of the space inside of it. And because it's so large, it pushes the four nuclei to the periphery. So what you get is this large, and it's going to, this vacuole will usually stain darker with trichrome. This large emptiness in the center, and it's pushing all the nuclei to the periphery. So here's a black and white drawing of it, and here's what it would look like in a patient specimen.